What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And I'm going to talk about this East Coco song that AWax dropped. There's been a lot of reaction videos. For the most part, I've thought they were good. They asked some good questions. There's one in particular that I'm not a fan of, and I think I carried away. I'll address that at the end of this. But what I want to do is talk about some of the legal questions that I've heard folks ask, both in the comments of videos and people have reached out. What happens in this situation? What happens in that situation? For those unfamiliar with the song, I suggest you go listen to it. I'll link at the end of this, of course. AWax basically says that before Woodie passed away in 2006 from a self-inflicted injury, he left a confession to this incident that happened many years ago, in which this individual, Snoop, from Antioch, Woodie's homeboy, wound up getting incarcerated and is serving multiple life sentences. Snoop's still incarcerated. He's always proclaimed his innocence. And the streets have long said that Woodie and Blackbird were responsible for it. And so it's also long been said that Woodie left this confession before he passed. AWax confirms it in this song. And yeah, so listen to the song. My stuff is this. So some people want to know, can Woodie's mom get in trouble for not releasing this confession? And the answer is no, right? She's not under any obligation to do so. The case is solved as far as the DA is concerned, as far as the law is concerned, the case is over. So she's not withholding any evidence to an active investigation, which could be a crime. This is a solved case. Whether it was solved the right way or not is a different story. So if this gets out and Snoop gets released, can Woodie's family or can Woodie's estate, right, the royalties from his music, that kind of stuff, can the victims go after that money? Or even if Snoop doesn't get out, can the victims go after that money? The victims cannot go after the money right now for sure, because Woodie's not convicted of anything, right? And Woodie will never be convicted of anything because he's passed. And so there are histories, of course, of families of victims going after the people responsible and getting money from them for damages. So, but that standard is a lot lower than the standard to catch a case or to get released off of a case. So if Woodie's mom was to put that stuff out there, there's a potential that the family could sue, that the families, right? There were 5 victims, if I remember right, 1 passed away. And so those numbers might be off. But nonetheless, there's multiple victims. Those families potentially could sue based on the confession. But the defense to that would be, hey, there's this confession, but somebody's incarcerated for it. And that would be probably a pretty good defense. And so what about Snoop, right? Can Snoop get out based off this confession? The answer is a maybe and an unlikely. And the reasons are this. There is room in the law for dying declarations, and they're called different things, but I'll call it that just in this case to be simple, right? There is room in the law for that. And the reason there's room for the law in that is normally hearsay. So normally a statement that's made cannot be introduced in court as evidence unless you're able to cross-examine and question the person who made the statement, right? And so in this case, obviously, Woodie's no longer here, so he can't be cross-examined and questioned. But if the statement is made as a type of dying declaration, then the law makes room for that. My opinion is in this case, that statement would not be admissible. The video, Wax references a video, whether it's a video, it's a written statement, both. Let's assume that the statement is very clear, right? And Woodie says things in there that makes it absolutely clear that he was responsible and Snoop's not, or that somebody else potentially responsible, but I think it's a self-confession. Then it's been so long, right? Woodie passed in 2006, that the DA, the prosecutors, law enforcement, everybody who has an interest in making sure that this case doesn't get upset that this case doesn't go back to trial, that Snoop doesn't get out, is going to argue that how do we know it's legitimate all this time later, right? How do we know this is right before he passed? How do we know that things haven't been altered? How do we know that he wasn't being pressured at the time? I'm not saying that any of that stuff happened, of course, but that is going to be their argument. If somebody is shot and they're lying in the street and there's people standing around and they say, hey, Joe Blow did it, then, and it's investigated and Joe Blow gets popped, that statement's introduced because of the circumstances under which it was heard. The circumstances of this one are different than that, right? And so, again, the odds are that statement would never be admissible in a court of law for the purposes of a criminal proceeding. Let's say, for argument's sake, the statement does make its way in, right? The court does allow it to be introduced as evidence, as a confession. That doesn't necessarily get Snoop out. Folks would like to believe it would, right? And ideally, that's the way it would work. But no, appeals are really complicated things. And Snoop's been through some appeals, to the best of my knowledge, but new evidence comes up, you can try to get back into court, even if you've already exhausted appeals, because it's new. Mac Minister is getting a hearing because one of the witnesses has recanted, and that's the whole killing of Fat Tone and Cocaine Cowboy, allegedly in response to Mac Dre being killed. I actually did a whole series and talked to Jace Corleone, who's also been convicted of that. We have his baby's mama telling on him on camera, everything that's in a playlist I'll link to at the end of this. And so there is history of that sort of thing happening. In this case, I think what the DA and what the cops would use is the threat of perjury, right? The statute of limitations in California, when it comes to perjury, is 3 years after the perjury is discovered. So if they find people now who have any statements that are different than what they may have said under oath before, no matter what their motivations were, maybe that is how they remembered it. Maybe they thought they were being helpful to the defense. There's a ton of maybes, right? If they say anything different now, then they open themselves up to perjury. And DAs are known to threaten that, to discourage people from getting involved. There's also folks that may have been involved and made statements at the time who just don't want to be back involved in a court case, right? This is decades old, and for them, they just don't want to deal with it. And so it gets very difficult to go back and involve people that may have been involved back then. So there's a lot of uphill battles to a challenge like this. Again, Snoop has always maintained his innocence. From my understanding, and I haven't seen Snoop's legal documents, but to the best of my knowledge, he was convicted primarily on the fact that, or the allegation that he got busted with a 38 in his possession after this shooting, right? Now, and a 38 caliber bullet was used in this crime, right? So in the shooting at the Quince. So here's the issue, right? There are 38 caliber bullets that can be fired out of a 357, right? Revolvers, 38 caliber revolvers, which is what Snoop got popped with, and then 357 caliber revolvers. So you can fire a 38 out of a 357, right? Certain 38s. There's no shells because it's a revolver. And so science and technology at the time, it would be easy for the cops to say, hey, this came from a 38, when it could have, in fact, came from a 357. The reason that 357 is relevant is because Woodie often rapped about having a 357, right? Whether he did or not, who knows? But he talked about it often in his music. The other suspected shooter has always been kind of street stalking in terms of Blackbird. Blackbird died in an incident involving the police, and had warrants out and was being looked at for multiple shootings, but that never went forward because he died in an incident involving police. And so, and the other thing used against Snoop, aside from the caliber of the bullet, was that he was identified by a witness. It's a quince. A lot of people are drinking. My understanding is the person that identified him in a photo lineup or whatever was, I think, twice over the legal limit, and so there's questions there. Also, you know, Woodie was white, Snoop's white. They didn't look like twins, but to an intoxicated person at a quince, is it possible that sure, anything's possible. So I'm not going to get into backstories or why Wax does this and Woodie's mom and this and that. A, that stuff's none of my business. B, I've heard some stuff about kind of, you know, conversations and situations that have happened in the past. But again, that's not my business. So I'm not going to present those questions because I have some ideas, but it's just not my place. I don't fault anybody else for presenting questions, right? Based on AWax song. You know, you create something, you put it in the public sphere, then of course people are going to wonder, right? And this was a high profile case when it happened. You know, Snoop has stayed being talked about by folks from Antioch. He has stayed proclaiming his incident. There's newspaper reports when he goes to board. Woodie obviously is legendary in music, legendary in Northern California, and obviously in Antioch in particular. So there's a lot of interest. Woodie, from everything I've ever heard from people that were close to him, that knew him, that were in the streets the same time as him, you know, so on and so forth, is everything that he presented himself to be in the music, right? You know, he's a cool dude. He was with the business. Obviously, he was a great rapper. He was a sharp businessman, and he put on for folks. So there's one in particular, one reaction video in particular that didn't sit right with me. That's Flacco's video. And the reason is this: just like how AWax's song is open to people talk about because it's in the public, so are YouTube videos. And I left comments on a video, but they were deleted. And so I figured I'd address it in my own video. This idea that Wood was being looked for, Flacco says that they were tasked with looking for Dino and then looking for Woodie after Black Widow. I don't know what he's talking about. There's an insinuation though, right, of that the NF was looking for Wood, which is just not true, right? It is not true. For one, Wood died in 2006. Black Widow was, I mean, that's a long time to be looking for somebody that wasn't really hiding, right? It's not as if Woodie was difficult to find if you were really that focused. But there's also some other little backstory there. There's a C, I'm not gonna mention his name, but there's a C from Pittsburgh that was in the Bay. Woodie knew who he was, vice versa. You know, they had a good rapport. And there was a time when I was out of prison, shortly after I was out, in 2005, maybe it was in 2006, but I got out December 05. So around that time, some individuals from Richmond did come looking for Wood, right? That was killed quickly. There's an hermano who's not from Contra Costa County. He's actually from another city, but he was out there at the time. I know him, you know, I know him fairly well. He put the brakes to that with the quickness. And that sort of thing would happen sometimes in terms of folks stepping on each other's toes, people operating up under different individuals, different regiments, what have you, and some overlap happening. I was never with street functions. That's not my thing. But it doesn't mean I lack common sense. And it doesn't mean that not aware of what's happening out there. Somebody can name every freeway exit along Highway 4, and that does not mean that they know what's going on through Antioch. And so that just didn't happen. This idea that he was being looked for, that didn't sit right with me because it leaves impressions in people's heads. And there's been rumors before about the NF and Wood and this and that. there was no issue there. There was never an issue there, period. Frankly, should be end of conversation. Wood had good relationships with people, and we'll just leave it at that. He wasn't getting taxed, he wasn't getting pressured, nobody was looking for him. Like it that feeds into a narrative that's just not true, and it's disrespectful to somebody who has a legacy in the streets and somebody who has passed and can't speak for themselves. And there's a lot of other people that can speak for this. They're not necessarily so excited to get on YouTube and do it because they dismiss this YouTube stuff as just chatter. But what that kind of struck a nerve with me, and so I thought I would address it. I don't want to be the guy that runs around correcting the record, in particular when it comes to Flacco. But if you're going to put stuff out there, at least be accurate, man. And there's a responsibility there. And I don't influence anybody else putting out videos, right? I just respond sometimes to what others put out there. And so just want to make that clear. Wood wasn't being looked for. I have a lot of friends, I have a lot of family, I have a lot of folks that was active in Salinas Regiment, active in San Jose Regiment, that were out in Contra Costa and had different relationships. And yeah, I don't know where that comes from. I don't, I know very, very, very few people out there that ever even saw Flacco, and when they did, it wasn't good situations. And so I don't know where that comes from. But anyway, man, help others move with excellence. That's what homies do. Keep it 100. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. And help your community, man, because they need you. It's a dope song. I suggest you check it out. And, if you got feedback on it, obviously leave it in the comments. I don't block other channels or whoever from commenting. So have at it. Take care. Check out the other content. And I'll see you guys again soon.